Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of SB and Roxy, where we have conversations for the everyday woman by two everyday women. Today, the topic is the new 40. Coming off of our conversation in regards to dating with millennials and Gen Z, we thought it'd be a great idea to have the opportunity for women to receive some information about what it might look like, or what a person's journey might look like to motherhood, 40 and beyond. So today we have a special guest. Our special guest is Marceia Hawkins. She's Angelino, has been an Angelino since 2005 by way of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. She holds a BA in Communications from DePaul University, Chicago, and a Master's of Education and English from Pepperdine. Marceia spent many years in the entertainment industry before pursuing a career in corporate America, and she is now an account executive for Spectrum Enterprise. Welcome, welcome, Marceia. And thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. So first, I would just like to kind of ask you just a broad general question about coming into your 40s, this new chapter of life. Have you had a shift in maybe mindset, thought process, feeling a little different, or just what has it been like since you've stepped into your 40s?
That is an excellent question. I think just navigating kind of different expectations in the Black culture, right? When you're 40 and you are unmarried and you don't have children, unfortunately, depending on who you talk to, it's almost like it's a death sentence. Like, you're 40, you don't have a husband, you don't have kids. It's like singleness is not a disease. Not having children is not a disease. And for a lot of Black women, we're focused on our career, we're focused on education, starting a business. And then just within our culture, there's an abundance of quality marriage material Black men to go around for everybody. There's so many circumstances that play into that. So for me, I look at it like I am still beautiful. I can still have children. I can live the full abundant life that God intended for me to have. And I'm not going to allow the societal or cultural expectations of where I should be or who I should be just because I'm 40 define me. It's like age is a number, but it's not all encompassing. There's so many great and wonderful things that God has in store. So that's where my focus is. I don't allow society or culture to dictate where I am and who I am.
That's
Awesome.
beautiful. It takes a strong woman, right, to have that position. And also the self-awareness that you have about yourself. And we're hearing that more and more. We've done a couple shows on dating younger, getting married later in life. We talked about career. We talked about raising children. And so, what you just stated is pretty common, right? And it's not really specific to ethnicities, I would say, as well. We're seeing these trends in delayed marriage, delayed motherhood across races, across ethnicities, and across ages. So it's not uncommon, and it's quite interesting. And when you wonder why is this happening, you talked about marriage material, and could that be coupled with our career, with our ambition, with our timeline for getting to a certain point in our career that we feel, okay, now I can take a breath, right, and think about those other things. So yeah, a lot of good points you made.
Thank you.
So how did you come? Well, let me go back. What are your thoughts specifically for you, individually, in regards to motherhood and moving forward, provided the information, everything that you just said? What does that look like, or what do you envision that to look like for you?
Absolutely. So that is that's a great question. And I think that the more I got educated on how much age, like my actual age, but furthermore, the age of my reproductive system. Meaning, if I knew then what I know now, I would have tried diligently to freeze my eggs sooner, right? No
Wow.
one ever explained that to me. Meaning, I'm 40, but according to my reproductive years, I'm actually 46. The reason being is when I actually froze my eggs, that was the third fertility doctor that I worked with. I
Mm.
started this process when I was 35, and I
Wow.
actually froze my eggs when I was 39, when I had an insurance provision to pay for it. A part of the reason previously financial was a part of it, but there was other variables. But basically, my fertility doctor said, Marcia, most women or the average woman starts her menstrual cycle when she's 14. That's when the average woman, or a lot of women start around that time, of course, give or take. I started at the age of 8, 2 weeks before my 9th birthday. So
Mhm.
he said, we are born all females, unless there's, some sort of handicap or, an issue of some sort. The vast majority of women that are born as genetic women are born with as many eggs as we're ever going to have. I'll be honest, I did not know that. Like, that was not something that was taught in science class, that, oh, we already have eggs in our body. Forgive me, I just didn't know that. So he said, because you started so young at 8, you're already dropping out eggs every single month, depleting, for the lack of better words, your reproductive stash, right? So with this doctor that I was able to freeze with, when I started the process, he's like, Marcia, you only have a 5% chance of a live birth, because I've never been pregnant before. I didn't try to get pregnant.
Wow.
I don't mind sharing. I was abstinent for 15 years, and there's a lot of layers to that. I don't know if we'll have time to get into all of that, but I just grew up very religious. Very much don't have sex till you're married. You're gonna go to hell if you do. So I didn't have a level of like comfort in enjoying or having sex freely, if you will. And so I didn't really put myself in a position to get pregnant to know one way or the other. And so when I started the process, I had 2 cysts in each ovary and no egg follicles.
Mm.
And he said, you only have 5% chance. He said, if you didn't have insurance, Marcia, I would tell you not to move forward. It doesn't make sense for you to waste your money. You're in the stage right before premenopause. You know, don't even do it. But I prayed and I said, well, doctor, I know what God said. It doesn't match what you said. And so I chose to move forward and was able to have some success at freezing 2 eggs the first cycle and 1 the second cycle. So total for 3.
Wow. Wow. So okay, let's go back a bit, because you gave a lot of information. I want to make sure the audience receives everything that you
Sure.
said. So provided what you were told and your experience, what would you say is the first step of the process for a young woman, and how early should they start? So they should be thinking about when they begin their cycle, and then are going to a doctor to determine, okay, because I was young like you, I was 10. So from 10 to how long do I have? And then when should I start this process? So kind of walk the audience through the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So something that I think should be incorporated in educating women is that identify how old you were when you started your cycle, right? So that way a woman has a gauge of, okay, I know I'm 40, but how old is my reproductive system? Because the older the reproductive system gets, they always say the older women are, the more challenging it is for her to successfully get pregnant, carry a child, because the risk, and carry full term to a, life, full term to have a live child, but what about how old her reproductive system is? If she's 42, but she started her cycle young, then her reproductive
Mhm.
system might be really 48. So that's something that women should be educated on much younger. I would
Mhm.
also say we're considered geriatric, in terms of reproducing at the age of 35. Once you hit 35, every year the percentages greatly decrease for being able to conceive and have a live birth. That's what they call it, a live birth, your
Mhm.
chances. Not just getting pregnant, but a live birth. They
Mhm.
decrease by then. So I feel like any woman that is not married, thinking about having children in a relationship where that's a topic of conversation, I would say early 30s, early to mid 30s, there needs to start being some internal conversations about her desires to have children, what that looks like, and based upon her relational status, or unless she's someone who desires to do it on her own, right? Like strategically. And she probably wants to do a consultation with a fertility doctor just to see what her state is, right? Because if you're 33 and they go in and look and say, oh, you only have 2 egg follicles in one ovary and 3 in another, you might want to get started on that process sooner than later. So that way it's kind of like insurance, like life insurance. You can kind of have some provision to have a child when you feel ready, instead of being forced by your age or circumstance to do it prematurely.
Yeah, it truly is a blessing that medical technology has advanced, that we can have those options available. The unfortunate part is, my understanding is quite costly. And you alluded to being able to continue the process with
Yep.
insurance, but
Yes.
not all companies are going to have this provision in their employees' insurance policy. And so my understanding, it could be from, $50 to $100,000, right, for this process. And some people do it more than once, right, to get successful eggs. So, unfortunately, for a lot of people of color, I would imagine, notwithstanding, having good insurance at their jobs, commercial insurance, is probably cost prohibitive.
That is
Um,
100% accurate. Very, very
yeah.
accurate.
When you talked about the incidence of births, this is an article from Women in Fertility. It says that, and the title is Fertility After Age of 40, looking at IVF for women in their 40s. At age 40 and above, women have reduced fertility as compared to that seen in younger women. We know that to be true, right? They also have substantially lower success rates with fertility treatments, including in vitro. Some of the stats they give us, look at the decline in birth rates for women by age. So the decline in live birth, which you just mentioned, the decline in live birth success rates by female age begin at about age 30, begin declining, right? The curve becomes steeper starting at about age 38. And that's the egg quantity, and the egg quality decreases faster, which you talked about as well. So at age 44 and above, there are almost never babies born from IVF using a woman's own eggs.
Correct.
Right? And the success rate of using eggs over age 44 is 1% per attempt.
Correct.
And think of the cost. And I imagine when you're going through the process, I understand there's shots involved and a lot of other things you have to monitor, your hormones. And so it's a lot for women.
It is.
It's a lot.
It is. And I did it by myself. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Proceed. Go ahead.
I was going to say I did it by myself, meaning I have cousins and friends who went through the process of IVF with their spouse or significant others. So they had a support system where they had somebody else giving them their shot, somebody else in the bathroom doing their trigger shot on a business trip, things like that. I literally have all the syringes. I have 4 kind of you dispose of all your needles and syringes and everything. I have that here. I gave myself the shots like a true champion every day on my own in my stomach, just doing it. And it was very miraculous, like I said, because when I started, he said, you have nothing. He said, you're the stage right before premenopause, Marceia. Basically, in a matter of words, that ship has sailed for you. You're not going to be able to have kids. And I said, this doesn't sit well with me. So I prayed about it. And he said, well, if nothing is sprouting up by day 4 of my first cycle, he said we could just stop. And I prayed that weekend. And I actually, ironically, was supposed to be at Roxanne's house that weekend. And she probably knows what I'm talking about. I was supposed to be there that weekend. That was a year ago, roughly around this time. And I stayed in that whole weekend and just prayed and prayed and prayed. And when I went back for them to look at them the first time, they said, whoa, you have 3 egg follicles growing. It was like they said, we've never seen this happen before. And 3 turned to 6, turned to 8 egg follicles. And then when I went in for my extraction, only 2 had eggs that were large enough, if you will, mature enough to be able to extract, and then they test them and freeze them.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty amazing. And to think of, having to do that on your own, right? That's even an extra hurdle, right?
Mhm.
Emotionally and
It is.
physically.
It is.
I identified with your statement earlier about your upbringing. I too was raised in a very strict background, and you get married, then you have children, and you don't have sex before. It was never discussed, but that was the expectation. So I didn't get married until much later, as women consider later in life, and I had my child at 30, a live birth. After that, I had several miscarriages,
Mm,
late trimester. So
mm,
I do contribute that, I think, to age. I also contributed to my lifestyle. I think stress, I
mhm.
think work and travel, I believe contributed a lot to that.
I believe so too.
So I have a different outlook on women, and I like to encourage all women, have your babies, just have them. Forget about societal standards. You obviously your faith is important. Have your babies and do what it takes. My daughter's 25, and because of you and other women I've talked to, I've encouraged her. Hey, why don't you think about freezing your eggs now?
Hmm.
Because you don't know what the future is going to hold, and she wants to have children. It may not happen the traditional mode that
Right.
you know.
Right.
So I said, at least you have the choice and option, and you'll have control. So I'm
Right.
encouraging her now to think about freezing your eggs now at 25.
Right. Absolutely. And I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. I think women should also be educated on freezing eggs, only embryos when you're, kind of in a more secure relationship, because a lot of women, so freezing embryos, so for viewers that are watching, freezing embryos is better than eggs. What that means is it's an egg with sperm. Once an egg and sperm are put together, it's called an embryo, and they can test that embryo for all type of genetic diseases, abnormalities, the correct amount of chromosomes. Like, they can test it before the stage of implantation to make sure that embryo is genetically healthy enough to have a high percentage of uh, attaching to the uterine wall and hopefully creating a live birth. And so I know women that were in relationships outside of marriage that thought, oh, these are going to work out. And they spend all this money, like to your point earlier. Most people do not have an insurance provision.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like, I didn't look at the statistics, but I think it's like less than 15% of women in the United States have insurance to pay for this. This is not
Mm-hmm.
standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you're in a relationship and it's going well, you decide, okay, him and I want to have kids, you spend all this money out of pocket on freezing these embryos, and the relationship doesn't work out, you can't move forward because legally in most states, especially California, both parties have to agree. So if you frozen embryos and you break up, and what according to whatever you all signed, it's he has to sign yes and you have to sign yes, and he doesn't want to move forward or you don't want to move forward, you've spent all this money and went through this whole process to now not have anything to move forward with and have to start all over. Versus if you freeze just your eggs, that is yours, that nobody else
Mm-hmm.
can govern what you decide to do with them. So that way, as you navigate through different relationships, you still have your eggs there for you to utilize as you see fit on your own terms versus
Fascinating.
needing somebody else's consent.
Such good information, Marcia. Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's such good information because I
Mm-hmm.
most women don't know that either, you know?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And if it's any consolation, one of my girlfriends, she went through IVF. I think they went through 3 rounds when she was married to her husband. He fought her the entire way. His
Why?
his because he did not want more children, but he
Oh,
told her he was willing to have more because he already had 2 children from a previous
ah,
marriage. And he told her that because he knew that was a deal breaker for her because she didn't
mhm.
have any children. So they get married and then he reverses and said, "Oh no, I didn't."
Mm.
So he went along with it so far, but he was like doing things like wouldn't submit the sperm when it's supposed to. She's having to run it to the doctor. It was
It's
crazy and
yeah.
chaotic. And
Yeah.
so when you make that point that you will have control if you just
Mm-hmm.
go just the egg route and you have total control over that, because I know that would have been another piece of their divorce and the argument and the whole thing if they had those kind of on standby when they got divorced.
Yeah.
She ended up adopting, so that's another route
Right.
to motherhood. Um, but yeah, sometimes it's better not to have the partner.
Right.
to
Right.
to your point, yes, is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
I also wanted to circle back to something. So you were talking about having to give yourself the injections and do
Mhm.
all that. Are there side effects that you physically, a person might physically experience as well, connected to the injection? Can you speak to that
Sure,
for a moment?
absolutely. So a lot of times, doctors will tell a woman that expect to gain about 10 to 15 pounds from this process because you are injecting your cells with all these hormones that are causing your body to release more eggs than it naturally would during your, presuming you're regular with your menstrual cycle, one a
Mhm.
month. You're giving yourself all this. So my stomach was definitely puffy, more bloated than usual. You're carrying water weight because your body's trying to figure out how to absorb these hormones that have you kind of on level 100, for lack of better words. You're emotional. I remember, kind of like when you have your menstrual, you're emotional anyways, but now you're emotional times 100 all the time. You're like looking outside like the sky is blue and you don't even know why you're crying. You're just emotional. The side effects can vary person to person, but I would just say mine was definitely feeling more emotional as far as crying, because I'm not somebody who just cries often, definitely not publicly or for no reason, but I just felt like kind of sad, almost like how somebody would feel when they're experiencing depression, like where I'm like, I'm feeling sad and I can't really
Mhm.
explain why I'm sad, which is a part
Right.
of the and then you can have some pain and tenderness in the site of your injection, right? Because some of these needles, are pretty long, and you're mixing medication. You just don't know how your body's going to react. You could feel nausea, depending on things. Make sure me and saltine crackers were my best friend. That I just ate those all the time. So just lots of different side effects like that. I do want to mention though, there are pros and cons to each. So if a woman freezes eggs by themselves, the pro is obviously she legally has the ability to decide what she wants to do. But a con is because you can't really test eggs the way you can embryos, then freezing eggs by themselves depreciate significantly every year because there's nothing that's kind of keeping it intact like an embryo versus
Mhm.
an embryo. You could test that immediately. And they always say fresh embryos or fresh eggs, almost like food, is better than frozen because it's like
Mhm.
meat. When you buy a package of meat and you cook ground turkey today, it's probably going to taste a lot better than if you were to freeze ground turkey for a year and thaw it out and then try to cook it. There's going to be a significant difference in taste, maybe quality. So it's just like that. So they encourage women that are married or in relationships with somebody that if you want to move forward, do the embryo so that way they can test them and then like go straight into like an IVF cycle or at least test the embryos and know those are good, because the problem with eggs without the sperm is, I don't want to speak this into existence, but hypothetically, when
Mhm.
I'm ready and we thaw my 3 eggs out and put them with sperm and they test them, it could be none of these are good, meaning I went through all of this and none
Yeah.
of the eggs were good enough with the sperm to genetically be healthy enough to attach to my uterus and create a live birth. So
I
there's a
would
lot
I
of
would imagine with some of the new CRISPR technology in gene editing, and maybe they're not doing it yet. I would imagine they are. They're probably, using the CRISPR to go in to edit the DNA of the bad aspects of that embryo or egg and be able to remove the bad and replace it with good. So, I mean, they're doing it with all kinds of diseases now. I would imagine that's going to be down the line. But
okay.
my question to you, how long is your window of opportunity, Marcia, to use your current eggs or
So
embryos?
that's a loaded question. So I'll simplify it by saying my insurance paid for the first year. I just got a bill actually. It's roughly like $860 per year to pay for the freezing at the
Okay.
facility. So I can
Okay.
kind of keep them frozen as long as I want to, but it's kind of like I'm 40. I'm already experiencing aspects of kind of heading toward that perimenopause stage, which is
Mm-hmm.
the stage before premenopause. Like
Mm-hmm.
instead of my cycle being every 28 days now I'm getting a cycle every 25 days. It's
Mm-hmm.
coming
Mm-hmm.
a lot sooner. because
Mm-hmm.
he's like, your body is like, this is it. We're on our last leg. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just fervent prayer because I do, Lord willing, if it's in his will, I do desire motherhood biologically, meaning there's nothing
Okay.
wrong with all methods, but I truly want my DNA, my genetic makeup to be in a child and I would love to give birth to that child. I would like that experience. So it's kind of like all of my doctors are like, well, you need to get pregnant like yesterday. But I don't desire to raise a child on my own. I came from a two-parent
Mm-hmm.
household. I've been married 44 plus years. It's a lot of hard work. It's very expensive. I
Mm-hmm.
need a support system that unfortunately I don't have yet. I believe in saying yet to things that I desire to speak those things that be not as though they already are. So my window is, Lord, any day, like any
Okay.
day, time you bless me. I would like somebody, and my profile of dating has changed as I've gotten educated on my prognosis.
Mm-hmm.
Before,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
was, I want a man that wants kids, wants kids, wants kids, wants kids. Now
Yeah.
it's, I want a man that wants me,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want that fear of, since he says I have a 5% chance of a live birth, this man that doesn't have children, that really wants them, we get married, we try to have a baby naturally, it doesn't work. We use my three
Mm-hmm.
eggs, it doesn't work. We do
Mm-hmm.
all these things and it doesn't work. And he's like, hey, Marcia, I love you, but I really want two and three children
Mm-hmm.
biologically, not through adoption, not through being a foster parent. Marcia, let's divorce. That would devastate me, right? That would devastate me. So I
Okay.
believe in having adult conversations in this dating process early on. Do
Mm-hmm.
you want more children? Do you not? How many children? Is that a deal breaker for you if your wife cannot have them? Like, really seeing where somebody is and where I am. So
Yeah.
that way I don't have that fear of a man leaving me if I can't get him something that he really wants.
Yeah, and that's very honest and transparent of you. I have a neighbor who I'll say within her early 40s, an educator, and was waiting for the same thing, but ultimately decided that she was going to use an unknown donor. I believe she was able to select some characteristics, I think, about the donor, but
Mm-hmm.
she had a beautiful baby boy, just beautiful. And, she's a single mother today, but, a wonderful mother raising just a child filled with love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful to see that,
Yeah.
she had that, again, choice.
Yeah.
So,
I-
mhm.
And I know women who've done that too. And I'll just say for me, and I think everybody, it's just about, what you desire. I want life partnership. Like my
Mhm.
desire is not just to be a mom. I want a life partner. I want somebody that we can grow old together, meaning if it was never God's will for me to have a child, I still desire my best friend, somebody
Okay.
that I like being around. And so for
Mhm,
me,
mhm.
it's twofold. And I'll just say, as of yet, I have not felt the desire, which I can, to move forward with a donor, whether it's through a sperm bank or a friend or something like that,
Yeah,
to move forward on my own, because I just really, I want to do it with somebody.
Wow. You
lovely.
provided so much great information. I learned something. I learned a couple of things as we were talking, and I've had a couple of friends go through this process, and I still
Mhm.
learned something new today. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Before we wrap, if you were to give a young woman what would be your top three recommendations for them to do right now if they're really contemplating and thinking, should this be the route for me? What would be your top three recommendations for them?
Yes, I would say as women are approaching the age, and I'm also incorporating the statistics that Roxanne read earlier, as you're approaching the age of 30, if you are single and there doesn't look like you have any potentials for marriage, and this is for people who want to get married, right? I'm gonna, for those people who don't want to get married, this is, you kind of can take the course of action you want, because relationship is not going to be tied to when you have a child. But for those who kind of want a more traditional path, right, of being married or being in a life partnership prior to having a child, as you're approaching the age of 30, start doing a consultation with a fertility doctor to gauge your kind of fertility kind of variables. Where am I? How many egg follicles do I have? Just all the information we kind of briefly touched on. Do that,
Mhm.
because that will let a woman know, versus a woman who has, on the top 10%, 40 egg follicles. The doctor might say, oh, you've got 3 years or 4 years before we can even have that, versus a woman that is 30, 31, and he's like, you only have 5 in one ovary and 2 in another. We might want to do this sooner than later. Do a consultation, which is typically free, with a well-known, fertility doctor to really gauge your fertility. Number 2, and this is probably a conversation for another podcast episode, but again, for those who want a more traditional trajectory, I think being more marriage-minded at a younger age. I was not. I did not have that information. So when you are in undergrad and they say that's the best time for, Black women or women of other races to meet their life partner, being more marriage-minded and balancing that with their own personal goals, education, and career ambitions. Thinking about that time frame versus just being focused on career, because then it's like time passes by and you look up like, I'm going to be 40 and, I didn't focus on that. So I would say being more marriage relationship minded at a younger age. And number 3, I would say write down a life plan. And this is more for those who are listening and watching that are faith-based. It says, without a vision, my people perish, or for lack of knowledge, write down what your life plan is, pray about it, and try to do things and take those steps to make those things happen. It's even like with dating. I'm intentionally dating now, but before I wasn't really putting myself out there or paying attention to my surroundings. Just, being more intentional about, hey, unless you're nothing wrong with it, but unless you literally want to meet the man that God drops off at your door, you do have to put yourself out there, whether that's a dating app, whether that is talking with a matchmaker, whether that's asking your friends.
I love it.
You have to be intentional. And so I joined Bumble and Hinge. And I still go on dates now and meet different guys. And I think it allows you to weed through guys much faster before you even have a first date, to assess their level of being a potential.
Okay. I'm not familiar with the Bumble and Hinge, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yes, I will definitely tell you about all of
that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Marceia.
You're very welcome.
This was such an informative conversation. We're definitely going to have you back because one of the last points that you just talked about, we brought up in a previous episode, Ebony K. Williams, which I believe you know her.
We know each other very well, yeah.
So she had the conversation about women as they pursue that BA or getting your law degree, also pursue that MRS. And
yes.
So we were going to circle back with that on that conversation with some of our previous guests. We'll have to bring you back on when we have that conversation too.
I would love that. Ebony and I we're both Virgos too, and we have similar personality characteristics. So I would absolutely love that. Thank you for having me on. And I hope the information that I've shared today was helpful for those viewers watching to be educated and go after what it is that you want. And hopefully I hear some success stories from some of the viewers.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Marceia. It's eye-opening.
No problem, ladies. Bye. Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for tuning in for another episode of SB and Roxy. We really appreciate you. Please follow us on all social media platforms. Be sure to like, comment, share, and specifically subscribe to our YouTube page. It doesn't cost you anything, and that's how we continue to do all that we do. And all of our social media handles will be at the end of this video, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.